The snow had stopped falling, but the wind hadn't. It screamed across the empty platform like something wild and starving, lifting the hem of her coat and clawing at her bare legs. Wania May spotted elk huddled on the depot bench, her fingers stiff and pale around a cracked tin mug that held no heat. She had poured the last of her water into it hours ago just to pretend. The train was gone. Her uncle had left her here, and it was 22 below. She blinked hard, fighting the weight behind her eyes. Crying wasted energy, and she had so little left. Her feet had gone numb sometime after sunset, but her hands still ached in pulses. She'd tucked her father's pocket watch into the mitten on her left hand, the metal the only warmth she still trusted. The ticking had stopped weeks ago, but she listened to it anyway. She didn't know how to pray, not properly. Her mother had taught her the crow songs, but her uncle said they were heathen things, and her father died before he could teach her the rest. So she whispered instead. To the wind, to the stars, to the ghost of her father. If you're watching, she said through cracked lips, I'm trying. She had 14 cents in her pocket. She had a note her uncle had scrawled in angry handwriting, prepaid fare to St. Agnes Orphanage in Miles City. No return needed. She'd shown it to the station master, who laughed and shook his head. No ticket, no train. And there ain't no train tonight anyhow. Snow blocked the pass. He'd left her after that, muttering about Christmas Eve and fools. Now even the lamp above the depot door had gone out. The darkness pressed in, thick and silent, broken only by the whistle of wind and the groan of ice under the rafters. Her teeth chattered, though she couldn't feel her jaw anymore. She pulled her knees up tighter, fighting to keep her eyes open. Stay awake. That's what she'd heard once. If you fall asleep in the cold, you don't wake up. She wasn't scared of dying, not exactly. She just didn't want to go without someone knowing what had been done to her. The wind shifted, carrying the sharp scent of horse sweat and leather. She blinked again, certain her mind was playing tricks. But then came the crunch of hooves in snow. A shape moved in the dark, a rider tall and heavy-coated, shoulders hunched against the cold. His horse stamped and snorted, steam curling from its nose like smoke from a winter stove. Anyone here? The man called out, his voice rough but not unkind. She tried to answer. Her throat burned, her tongue too heavy. Only a noise came out, thin and useless. He stepped off the horse. His boots sank deep into the snow. It's all right. I'm just going to take a look. He knelt beside her, close enough that she could make out his face in the starlight. Weathered skin, maybe 50, grizzled beard tucked into a scarf. His eyes scanned her face, then her hands, then landed on the glint of brass in her mitten. He reached toward her, slowly touched the edge of the watch, flipped it open. The silence that followed was different, not shocked, not startled. It was the silence of memory being cracked wide open. This belonged to Chaska-spotted elk, he said, voice low. Your father. She tried to nod. Her head jerked once. Where is he? The man asked. Dead, she managed the word thick in her mouth. 6 months now. His face did something complicated. I'm Etienne Baptiste. Your father and I worked this land together before the mine took him. He told me if anything ever happened. He pulled a wool blanket from his saddle and wrapped it around her shoulders. I'm going to lift you. Just for a minute. That all right? She didn't speak, just gave the smallest nod she could. He picked her up like she was made of feathers, and snow settled her on the saddle in front of him. His arms came around her to hold the reins, shielding her from the worst of the wind. There's a warm house 5 miles west, he said, his breath brushing her ear. Hot food. My sister Clara. You're safe now, girl. The words were too big to believe. but she leaned back against his chest anyway. They rode through the dark hooves crunching rhythmically, the wind pushing them sideways now and then. Her teeth stopped chattering. That scared her more than anything. She'd heard that was a bad sign, but then a light appeared ahead, then more. A long house with golden windows glowing like it had swallowed the sun. By the time they reached the porch, the front door was already open. A woman in her 50s stood in the light gray hair, pulled tight face sharp with intelligence and something like fury. "Etienne, what she's Chaska's girl," he said, as he dismounted and lifted her down. "He's dead." Elias left her at the depot alone. The woman's face went pale. Merciful God, bring her in. The heat inside struck her like a slap, her skin burning where it thawed. The woman Clara moved fast but gentle, stripping off frozen layers, wrapping her in quilts that smelled of sage and bread. She tested Wania's fingers, her toes muttering things about circulation and tissue damage. "Can you feel this?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good. That's good." "Miguel," she called. "Broth, not milk, stomach's too cold." A young man appeared with a mug of steaming beef broth. Etienne held it to her lips. It hurt going down, but she didn't care. She didn't stop sipping until it was empty. Clara examined the watch next. She wouldn't let go of it, Etienne said, even with her hands going blue. "It's his," Clara confirmed. "He always said it was for you, partner in all things." They found the forged note from Elias in her coat pocket. No money, no ticket, just the lie. "He meant to leave her to die," Clara said flatly. "And on Christmas Eve." Wania blinked again. Everything was swimming now. Warmth made her dizzy. Safe felt unfamiliar. "Uncle Elias said my papa was dead," she mumbled. "Said there was no one else. But before the mind took him, Papa said if I was ever alone, I should find Etienne Baptiste." He squeezed her shoulder, steady and warm. "You found me, Wania, and I won't let you go." That was the last thing she remembered before sleep pulled her under. Not the cold, not the fear, not the emptiness. Just the sound of someone finally keeping a promise. Even when her hands turned blue, she wouldn't let go of that watch. That's not just cold, that's memory holding tight. Clara said it in a low voice, standing by the stove with the folded coat in her hands. The fire crackled, casting long shadows on the log walls of the Baptiste house, but the words hung in the room like smoke. Etienne was quiet. He sat near the rocker, one boot tapping the floor without rhythm. His eyes hadn't left the girl bundled in quilts on the settee. She was asleep again, deeper this time. Her cheeks had color now, and her fingers curled around the brass pocket watch even as she dreamed. "She's tough," Clara added softer. "No child survives a night like that without a spirit full of fight." Etienne nodded slowly. "Chaska always said she had her mother's bones." "You saw the note, didn't you?" "It wasn't a note," he said, voice sharp. "It was a death sentence in a preacher's script." He stood and crossed the room, pulling the folded paper from his coat pocket. The ink was smeared in one corner where melted snow had touched it, but the writing was legible. "To the ticket master, please deliver the child Wania May Spotted Elk to the sisters at St. Agnes Orphanage. Fare is prepaid. No return needed." Spotted Elk. Clara held it like something filthy. No ticket, no payment. Not even a proper bag packed. He meant for her to die. Etienne's jaw tightened. He left her with 14 cents and a lie. A sharp knock broke the silence. Clara stepped to the window, peered through the curtain, then opened the door. Marie Swiftwater stepped in without waiting for an invitation. Her braids were wrapped in beaded cloth, and her long coat smelled faintly of cedar smoke and horse. She removed her gloves, slowly watching the room, as if reading more than what was said. "I heard from Miguel," she said. "He rode to the creek post. Said Etienne brought a girl in from the storm." "She's here," Clara said. "Resting." Marie's eyes shifted to the child on the settee, and something in her face softened. Crow, Cheyenne, Chaska's daughter. Marie's mouth pressed into a line. "And her mother gone," Etienne said. "Died birthing the second child. That one didn't live either." Chaska raised Wania himself. Marie stepped closer, looking at the child's face. She murmured a few words in Cheyenne, then ran 2 fingers gently along Wania's brow. "This girl has seen more pain than her bones should carry." Clara exhaled slowly. "She nearly died last night." "But she didn't," Marie said, standing straighter. "That means she's meant for something." Etienne passed Marie the note. She read it once, then again, her fingers tightening around the edge. "I'll take this to the judge myself." "I plan to go," Etienne said. "I'm not letting her out of my sight." "You'll need more than this," Marie warned. "The law favors blood. Elias is her uncle." "He's a coward," Etienne snapped. "He gambled away everything he had, and now wants to sell her future, too." "He'll say you're a bachelor," Clara added, "that it's improper for you to raise her." Etienne turned to the fire voice, low. "I don't care what he says. I gave Chaska my word. If anything happened, I'd look after her." Marie turned her attention back to Wania. "She'll need more than food and quilts, Etienne. She's been broken down slow. You'll have to rebuild her." "I know. She doesn't speak much." "She tried," Clara said, "but she's still weak. Her words are scattered." Marie stepped to her satchel and pulled out a small pouch. "When she wakes again, burn this near her. Sweetgrass and sage. Let the smoke speak when her throat can't." "Thank you." Marie nodded. "And Clara, yes, teach her. Letters, numbers. If this goes to court, we show them she thrives here, that she is healing under your care." Clara nodded. "I'll begin in the morning." By the next sunrise, Wania stirred with a fever sweat, her skin warm and damp beneath the quilts. Clara knelt beside her with a damp cloth. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're home now." The girl blinked slowly, still unsure of where she was, but she didn't fight. When Clara offered a spoonful of broth, she took it. When Etienne sat beside her with the watch, she reached for it and curled her fingers around it tightly. "Your father gave me this," he said quietly. "Said I'd know what to do with it if the time ever came." She didn't answer, but she kept holding it. Clara brought out a small slate that evening, just after supper. The kitchen smelled of elk stew and baked cornbread. Etienne sat at the table oil lamp, flickering while Marie read quietly in the corner. Wania sat across from Clara, arms still wrapped in a shawl. "We're going to start with your name," Clara said gently. Wania looked down at the slate, then up again. "Do you know the letters?" She shook her head. "That's all right. We'll start with W. That's the first letter in Wania. Watch." Clara drew a clean, careful W with the chalk. "Now you try." Wania reached for the chalk with her left hand still stiff but stronger than before. Her line wobbled, the point slipped, and her second attempt was no better. She scowled and tried to give the slate back. "No," Clara said, patient but firm. "Try again. It's yours." Something shifted in the girl's eyes. She bent over the slate again, jaw tight, and slowly etched a letter that almost looked like a W. Clara smiled. "There. That's it." Marie lifted her head. "The name you write is the name you keep." Wania didn't speak, but she pressed her palm flat against the slate like she was claiming it. Etienne stood. "I'll be heading to town in 2 days. I'll speak to Judge Two Bears, show him the note. Ask for a hearing, I'll come, Clara said. You'll be needed here. I'm not letting you face that man alone. Marie added, Elias won't wait long. He'll file his claim and the town won't hesitate to side with blood over truth. Etienne nodded. Then we start now. Paper, witnesses, proof of what she's endured. Clara gathered the slate and tucked it into a cloth satchel. We show them what it looks like when someone gets a second chance. Juanilla looked up, then not at Clara, not at Etienne, but at the window where the snow still drifted outside. Her face unreadable, her eyes dark and steady. She was alive, and someone would have to answer for that. She traced the letters in the frost on the window pane, W-A-N-I-Y-A. Her name finally hers. The glass was cold beneath her fingertip, but Juanilla didn't flinch. The letters lingered for a moment before the breath from her nose fogged them over again. She wiped the pane clean with her sleeve and started over. The first W came out crooked, the Y too wide, but she didn't stop. Not this time. Behind her, the kitchen bustled with morning. Clara stirred a pot of porridge on the stove while Etienne wrapped rawhide around a cracked stirrup outside the back door. Marie sat at the table with a willow basket in her lap, sorting dried herbs. The light was pale through the window, the kind of morning that promised more cold before any hint of spring. But inside the house there was warmth, real warmth, fire, food, voices that didn't rise in anger. Juanilla hadn't known quiet could feel like safety. Clara turned from the stove. Come sit, sweetheart. It's time for letters. Juanilla hesitated. Her slate and chalk waited on the table. She could still feel yesterday's shame in her fingers, too slow, too messy, not good enough. But she didn't want to stay invisible anymore. She crossed the room, slid into the chair, and picked up the chalk. All right, Clara said gently. We'll do your name again. Juanilla, just like on the window. Marie glanced over with a quiet smile. Names are power, she said. Say yours while you write it. Let it know you're claiming it. Juanilla dipped her head, almost shy. Then she pressed the chalk to the slate. She said softly, Anne. The Y gave her trouble. Her hand trembled and the lines came out uneven. Try again, Clara said. No rush. Just you and the letters. She did. 5 more times. By the last, the name was clear and almost smooth. Marie touched her shoulder. Your mother gave you that name. Juanilla means beautiful snow in Dakota. But in our ways, names are more than beauty. They're shields. They're maps. You remember that? Juanilla nodded, and something small bloomed in her chest. She hadn't known the meaning before. No one had ever told her. Uncle Elias had always shortened it to girl or worse. I didn't know her, she whispered. Marie's smile was soft. She was Cheyenne Crow, gentle voice, sharp mind. She sang when she worked, had hands that could stitch anything, but wouldn't wear shoes if she could help it. Juanilla closed her eyes. It felt like holding a memory she didn't know she had. Clara served the porridge and set a jar of chokecherry jam between them. Etienne came in stamping snow from his boots. Fence held through the night, he said. Got 3 elk by the ridge last night. If the meat's still there come noon, we'll haul it in. He leaned down to glance at Juanilla's slate. That yours, she turned it toward him. Juanilla, she said a little louder now. He grinned. That's a fine-looking name. After breakfast, Clara pulled her aside and handed her a second slate with a simple word home. This one's for practice, she said. You don't need to rush. Just think about what it means when you write it. Juanilla stared at the word long after Clara walked away. She'd never written that word before. Never dared think of it as something for her. Home had always been something owned by others, by her father, then her uncle, then no one. But this house, it didn't push her out. She copied the word. Home. Then again. And again. The afternoon brought the kind of cold that crept into the walls no matter how hard the fire tried. Clara set Wania to sorting buttons and mending simple tears in old linens. It wasn't exciting, but it felt like being useful. Etienne spent the day in the barn with Miguel, the ranch hand, who spoke little and moved like he heard the land talking under his boots. Wania watched from the window as they carried supplies back and forth from the shed. She'd started to notice things, how Etienne never raised his voice even when the weather turned or something broke. How Clara hummed when she chopped vegetables. How the whole place moved with a rhythm that didn't depend on fear. That night after dinner, Marie lit a bundle of sage and let the smoke drift around the room. "I want to show you something," she told Wania, "from your mother's side." She laid out 4 stones in a circle and placed a small, carved figure of a bison in the center. In the old stories, she said the bison came to the people in dreams, not to scare them, to remind them of who they were, where they came from. Wania sat cross-legged on the rug, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. "Your father was a strong man," Marie said, "but he lived between 2 worlds. He gave you the best of both. You carry the line of hunters and warriors, but also the builders and protectors. That's why you're still here." Wania didn't speak, but her hand reached slowly toward the bison figure. She ran her fingers over the carved ridges of its back. Marie placed a small bead into Wania's palm. "Every story has a start. This is yours." Later, as the fire burned low, Wania sat by the window again, staring into the dark. Etienne joined her with 2 cups of warm milk. "You did good today," he said. She nodded. "You're learning fast. Clara says your letters are getting steadier." She took a sip. "I want to read." "You will. Real books, not just slates." Etienne smiled. "Then we'll get you there." She hesitated. "What if they take me back?" He didn't answer right away. "Then we won't let them. They'll say you're not blood. They can say what they want. Your papa named me in that letter, and blood's just one kind of family. Promise is another." She leaned her head against his arm, not quite touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Through the dark, hoofbeats echoed faintly along the road past the ranch, 2 riders heading toward town. Wania straightened. "Who's that?" Etienne narrowed his eyes. "Might be the marshal, or someone worse." He stood slowly, moving to the door. Wania's fingers curled around the slate again. She had a name. She had a home. And someone was coming to take it away. Elias stood at the courthouse steps and said, "She's my blood, and blood wins in this territory." The word spread through town before Etienne even made it to the general store. By the time he tied his horse to the post outside Boone's Mercantile, he could feel the tension in the air, tight as a trap. Heads turned, mouths paused mid-gossip. A few men nodded politely, but none smiled. Inside, he grabbed coffee lamp oil and oats without making small talk. Boone, the store owner, packed the supplies in silence, glancing toward the door every few seconds, like he expected something to walk in behind Etienne. As Etienne handed over his coins, Boone finally spoke. "You hear Elias filed papers this morning?" "I heard," Etienne said, voice flat. "Says you kidnapped his niece. Said you took her to get at her inheritance." Etienne didn't answer. He took the parcel, tucked it under one arm, and left. Out on the boardwalk, he saw the source of the rot, Elias Spotted Elk, leaning against the saloon post, cigarette between his fingers, boot heel grinding into the snow. He wore a fine coat too clean for a man who claimed to be grieving, and his lawyer, a slick man named Vance Mallory, stood beside him like a shadow dressed in wool. Elias spotted Etienne and straightened. I hear you've been playing nursemaid to my kin. Etienne didn't slow. I hear you left her to freeze. Vance stepped forward. Mr. Spotted Elk has filed a formal guardianship claim with Judge Two Bears. He's her legal family. What you've done keeping her from him might be seen as unlawful detainment. Etienne stopped, turned. The girl was starving, frostbitten, no shoes worth the name. She had a note in your hand, no money and no ticket. Tell the judge that. I plan to, Elias said. And I'll tell him how a half-breed rancher with no wife or church standing took a girl into his house and kept her hidden. A slow, dangerous quiet settled between them. Etienne spoke low. You can say all you like. But I've got records. I've got witnesses. And I've got that girl learning to spell her name again because of the first warm nights she's known in months. Elias sneered. That girl has money coming when she turns 18. Her father left her that. I'm just making sure it don't get stolen by the likes of you. Vance stepped in again. We'll see you in court. I'll be there. Etienne turned and walked to his horse. He could feel Elias's eyes following him all the way down the street. By mid-afternoon, snow was falling again. Big, wet flakes that stuck to the earth like promises too heavy to shake off. Back at the ranch, Clara met him at the door with the same question already on her face. It's official, he said, stomping snow from his boots. Elias filed for guardianship. Clara pressed her lips together. Then we get ready. Wania sat at the table, slate in her lap, letters half written. She looked up, reading Etienne's face before he could speak. Is he coming here? Not yet, he said, setting the parcels down. But he's trying to take it to court. Why? Because he's afraid of what happens if you grow up free. She didn't answer, but she picked up the chalk again. That night, Clara pulled out a ledger from the cabinet drawer. In it were every weight, every meal, every lesson Wania had completed since she arrived. We'll show progress, Clara said. Her growth, her health, everything we've done right. Etienne nodded. We'll need testimonies too. Marie Miguel Doc Hollowtree, anyone who's seen her condition when she came here. Wania sat quiet near the fire, hugging her knees. He said he's family, she said finally. Is that what they'll believe they might? Etienne said honestly. But blood's only part of what makes a person fit. He wasn't family when Papa was alive. He never came to visit. Clara looked over. Do you remember anything about your father's wishes? He told me if I was ever alone to find you. That'll matter, Etienne said. We'll make it matter. In town, the next morning, Deputy Thomas Reed approached Etienne outside the feed store. He was a quiet young man, mixed Assiniboine and white with a steady gaze and a badge that didn't shine much. I heard what Elias said on the courthouse steps, Thomas muttered. I don't trust a man who smiles that wide while taking a child to court. He's after the trust fund. I know. What you don't know is that he's trying to get backing. He owes Keene over $200 at the saloon. He's using this guardianship as leverage to buy more time. Etienne's jaw set. He'll sell her future to pay off his liquor tab. Worse. Keene's got sway in town. Church donations, bank favors. They'll paint you as the threat, not him. Let them try. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be ready. With more than ledgers. Etienne nodded. I appreciate it. That afternoon, Marie arrived at the ranch with a bundle of hand-bound books and 2 cedar boxes. One held woven belts and beads. The other held a small pouch, wrapped in tanned deer hide. She needs more than facts, Marie said. She needs voice. She's still quiet, Clara said. She only talks in pieces. Then we help her speak another way. Marie opened one of the books and pointed to a drawing. This is her mother's tribe's way of storytelling. Symbols, colors, memory beads. She can build her story while she finds her voice. Juania watched silently as Marie laid out a circle of cloth on the table and placed the beads in the center. "Pick one that speaks to you," Marie said. Juania reached for a blue bead and set it down. "Sky?" Marie asked. "No," Juania said. "Cold." Marie nodded. "Then we start there." That night, Etienne sat by the fire staring into the flames as the house settled quiet around him. His coat still smelled of smoke and wind. He pulled the old pocket watch from the shelf and turned it in his hand. The back had scratches, a dent near the hinge, but it still held weight. He opened it. Inside, the photograph of Chaska was faded but strong. The note folded behind it had gone untouched since he found it. He read it again, fingers tight. "If anything ever happens, I want her with Etienne. He's the only one I trust. Elias is not to raise her. He's not blood in the ways that count." Etienne closed the watch and held it tight. They were coming, and this time it wouldn't be settled in snow or shadows. It would be settled where all things came to light. In her dream, she was still in the snow, but when she woke, the fire hadn't gone out, and someone had left her a book. Juania blinked slowly, her breath steady in the warm morning air. The quilt had slipped from her shoulder sometime in the night, and Clara had pulled it back up again without waking her. On the stool beside the settee sat a thin green book with a worn leather cover. There was no title on the front, just a small pressed feather in the corner. She sat up and touched it carefully. The spine creaked when she opened it. Inside, the words were neat and printed large. The first page read, "The Song of the Prairie." A ribbon was tucked between two chapters, as if someone had already chosen the spot for her to begin. She traced the first sentence with her finger. It took her a while to sound out the words in her head, but she got through the whole paragraph before the fire needed more wood. Etienne stepped in from the porch, snow still clinging to his coat. "Mornin', little hawk." She gave him a small smile. "I started reading." He raised his eyebrows, surprised. "You did?" She nodded and showed him the page. "It's hard." He laughed, then caught himself softening. "Hard's good. Hard means you're climbing." Clara bustled in from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. "She's ahead of where I thought she'd be. Her name number's up to 20, and she memorized half the alphabet already." "I only got a few letters right," Juania said. Clara winked. "That's still half more than yesterday." Marie was due to arrive again that afternoon. She'd sent word by Miguel that she wanted to prepare Juania for something called the naming bowl. Clara didn't explain it, only said Marie would know what it meant when she got there. While Clara baked and Etienne checked the barn fencing, with Miguel, Juania practiced writing on her slate and sounding out more from the green book. Her voice was slow and unsure, but each word she conquered felt like another step out of the snow that used to haunt her. When Marie arrived, the wind had picked up again, and she carried a copper bowl wrapped in buffalo hide. She set it gently on the table and called Juania over. "This is from the crow side of your blood," she said. "A naming bowl. Not to give you a new name, but to call your spirit into fullness." Juania sat across from her, eyes fixed on the bowl. Inside were small tokens, dried berries, carved stones, one feather, and a pinch of tobacco. "Each thing in this bowl carries a piece of your life," Marie said. "You'll take one at a time and tell me what it means to you. Even if it's just a word, even if it's only a sound." Juania reached in and pulled out the stone first. It was smooth, river-worn, the color of cloudy quartz. "Cold," she whispered. Marie nodded. "Why, it feels like when I was alone." "Then speak that truth aloud." Juania swallowed. "I was cold. My uncle said to wait. He said the train would take me to a home." But he lied. Clara stilled her hands. Etienne leaned against the doorframe and said nothing. Wania took the berry next. Sweet, she said. Clara's jam. The room lightened just a little. Next came the feather. Flying, she said. Not me, but my papa. I dream he has wings, Marie smiled. Then you carry part of that dream. They continued like that, each object pulling a piece of memory or emotion from her chest that she hadn't known how to give away before. When the bowl was empty, Wania looked up and found herself breathing easier. Marie covered the bowl again. Now your story is beginning to take shape. Etienne crouched beside her. There's something else, too. He pulled the pocket watch from his coat and opened it. She saw the faded photograph of her father. He unfolded a thin piece of paper from behind the photograph and handed it to Clara, who read it aloud. If anything ever happens, I want her with Etienne. He's the only one I trust. Elias is not to raise her. He's not blood in the ways that count. Wania held her breath. Clara folded the letter carefully. This changes everything. Marie nodded. The judge will have to hear it. A man's dying wish, a trusted name. But we'll need more, Etienne said. The town listens to gossip more than facts. Wania looked up. Can I speak in court? Clara hesitated. You can, sweetheart. But it won't be easy. I want to. Her voice was stronger than they'd heard it before. Marie put a hand over hers. Then we prepare you. Like a warrior before battle, with truth as your weapon. That night, Etienne sat with Wania in the lamplight. She practiced reading aloud from the Green Book. Her tongue stumbled, but her will did not. Clara stitched a clean dress for her to wear to town. Marie marked the days ahead with colored beads on a string and left a small satchel of dried herbs to help calm her dreams. Just before bed, Wania stood by the window and stared into the dark. Clara came beside her. What are you thinking? She pressed her palm to the glass. That it's not cold in here. Clara smiled, brushing the girl's braid from her shoulder. It hasn't been cold since you got here, Wania whispered. He's going to lie about me. About you, we know, Clara said. But we don't need to lie back. We have truth. The next morning, Etienne saddled the horses early. Clara packed the ledger and the watch, the note, and a fresh tin of cornbread. Marie arrived just before they left with a bundle of cedar branches and 2 small braids of sweetgrass. For strength, she said, handing one to Wania. As they rode toward Wolf Point, the wind carried the scent of thawing earth beneath the snow. A promise of spring under the weight of winter. Wania held the satchel close, her spine straight. Etienne watched her from the corner of his eye and nodded once. She had come from cold and silence, but now she rode toward fire. You walk in with truth, but they'll try to dress it in doubt. Marie's words echoed in Wania's chest as the 3 of them rode into Wolf Point just after sunrise. The town sat hushed under a heavy sky, the frost still clinging to window panes and fence rails. Smoke rose from chimneys in tall, quiet columns. They passed the chapel first, then the smithy, the saloon, and finally the courthouse, low and square, its white paint flaking at the corners, like the truth behind old men's promises. Wania clutched the satchel in her lap as they dismounted. Inside were the Green Book, the letter from her father, and the beads from her naming bowl. Etienne offered her his hand as they stepped onto the porch. You ready? He asked. She nodded, even though her knees trembled. The judge's chambers were inside, not the large courtroom. Judge Two Bears preferred smaller meetings before trials were set. He sat behind a desk, built from pine beams, older than Wania. His long black braid tucked behind his shoulder, eyes clear and watchful. Beside him stood his clerk, and in the corner sat Elias, arms folded, and mouth curled in a smile too sharp for kindness. "I see we're all here," the judge said, voice calm. "Thank you for receiving us," Clara said as she closed the door. "I always make time for matters of custody, especially when children are involved." The judge gestured to the bench. Juanilla sat beside Clara, her satchel resting on her knees. Etienne stood behind her, tall and still. Elias didn't stand. "I'm here to bring my niece home." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Where has she been in the care of this man, Etienne Baptiste?" Elias said, tilting his head in disdain. "Without legal cause, without permission." "She was abandoned at the train depot," Clara said, "in the middle of a snowstorm. No shoes, no food. She was on her way to the orphanage. She had no ticket. She had instructions. She had frostbite," Clara snapped. Judge Two Bears lifted a hand. "Enough. I've heard rumors on both sides, and I aim to deal in facts, not gossip. So we'll begin with records." Clara passed the ledger forward. "These are notes on her weight, meals, health, education since arriving. She's learned nearly the full alphabet. She's reading at beginner level, writing her name numbers. She sleeps through the night now. That wasn't the case when she first came." Judge Two Bears flipped through the book carefully. He paused once, then twice, noting something. "Her weight increased 12 pounds in a month. She was skin and bones," Etienne said. "Couldn't hold a full bowl of broth her first night." "Is that true, child?" the judge asked. Juanilla glanced at Clara, then up at the judge. "Yes, sir," the judge nodded. "Thank you for answering, and thank you for coming here." Elias huffed. "She's a child. She don't know what's best." Juanilla straightened. "I know who left me in the cold." Elias's mouth clamped shut. Etienne stepped forward. "We have a letter from Chaska Spotted Elk." Clara handed it to the judge, who unfolded it slowly. "I want her with Etienne," he read aloud. "He's the only one I trust. Elias is not to raise her. He's not blood in the ways that count." A long silence followed. Even Elias didn't speak. The judge folded the letter, set it beside the ledger, and steepled his fingers. "This letter changes the course of this case," he said. "It doesn't end it, but it speaks with the voice of the Father, and in this court that carries weight." Elias stood. "You'd trust a rancher over her family. I trust the words of a man who knew his own kin. I ain't got his money, but I've got blood." "Blood doesn't excuse neglect," the judge said, "or cruelty, or abandonment. She's got a trust fund. You think this man's not after it?" Juanilla's hands tightened on the satchel. She opened it, pulled out the small green book, and stood. "I asked to speak," she said. Judge Two Bears turned to her. "Go ahead." She opened the book and held it up. "This is the first thing I've ever read by myself." "Go on then," the judge said gently. Juanilla cleared her throat and began to read. Slowly, carefully. Her voice caught on some words, but she didn't stop. She finished the whole paragraph and looked up. "I was scared of words," she said. "I didn't know what they meant. But Clara taught me. And Etienne listens when I talk. Marie gave me stories from my people. And now I have my name." She opened the satchel again and showed the string of beads. "Each one is part of my memory. I don't want to go with him. He left me." Judge Two Bears looked at her a long time. Then he nodded once. "You may sit." Elias stepped forward again. "You gonna believe a girl who barely knows her own mind? I believe what I see," the judge said calmly. "I see a girl who was failing and is now growing. I see proof of care, proof of respect, and I see no such evidence from you." Elias's face darkened. "I will take this under advisement," the judge said. You'll both receive notice of the official hearing date within the week. Until then, Wania remains under the temporary guardianship of Etienne Baptiste. Clara placed her hand on Wania's back as the judge stood. Wania breathed out. Her fingers were cold, but not from fear, just from the waiting. Outside, the wind had shifted. The sky was clearing light, breaking through the morning gray. As they walked toward the horses, Clara murmured, "You were brave in there." "I had to be." Etienne smiled down at her. "He's going to fight harder now. You know that, right?" She nodded. "But so will I." She looked back once at the courthouse behind her, then forward again. She wasn't small in that seat anymore, not voiceless, not frozen. She had stood in front of the man who tried to erase her and said, "I'm still here." And that truth didn't shake. Sometimes justice moves slower than lies, but it moves. The words came from Clara that afternoon, while she taught Wania to bind a torn page from one of Etienne's old trail journals. The glue had to set before they folded it back in, so Wania sat with her hands in her lap, waiting. She wasn't good at waiting. Not anymore. It had been 3 days since the meeting with Judge Two Bears. No letter had come, no notice. Just silence and cold wind, and the knowledge that Elias wouldn't stop until he had another chance to twist things. Clara handed her a fresh sheet of paper. "Try writing your own sentence. Not copying, just something true." Wania thought for a while, then wrote slowly, "I was not left. I was chosen." Clara looked at it, eyes going glassy for a second. She reached over and squeezed Wania's hand. "That's one of the strongest things I've ever read." Outside, Etienne was chopping wood with Miguel near the side shed. Marie had returned to the reservation to gather documents from Chaska's old community, a letter from his tribal leader, a copy of his service in the Indian Scouts, a baptismal record from a traveling priest. "Paper speaks louder than memory to people like Elias," she'd said. "So we'll give them both." The ranch stayed quiet that day. Wind pushed against the eaves and the sky remained low and heavy, as if it too was waiting for something to break. Just before supper, Clara stepped outside to shake off the rugs and noticed a man approaching from the ridge. Etienne was already striding toward the gate. The man on horseback wore a long coat and a tall black hat. When he pulled it off, Clara's stomach dropped. Vance Mallory, Elias's lawyer. He didn't dismount, just tipped his head politely. "Good evening." "You're not welcome here," Etienne said. "I'm not here for trouble," Vance replied smoothly. "Just here with an offer. You can keep it. You might want to hear it." Etienne crossed his arms. Vance smiled faintly. "Elias is prepared to drop the custody claim. Walk away from the entire proceeding. In exchange, he asks for a modest payout from the trust when the girl turns 18. Just enough to clear his debts. Say $1,500. Clara's mouth opened. "He's trying to sell her off like a cow. Don't be dramatic," Vance said. "We all know this girl's presence here complicates things. The court's going to hear about her trauma, your lack of formal schooling credentials, the questionable situation of a bachelor raising a young girl. Elias is her only blood. He's trying to be reasonable. She's not a transaction," Etienne said. "Think of it as a settlement," Vance replied, adjusting his reins. "A clean break. You keep her, he gets paid off, and the judge doesn't have to wade through the mess." "No," came a voice behind them. They all turned. Wania stood at the edge of the porch, hair-braided hands steady at her sides. "You don't get to trade me for money." Vance's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," she said. "You're here because you know he'll lose. So you want to make it look like he's doing something kind." Wania Clara said gently. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." She stepped forward, snow crunching under her boots. She looked up at Vance without blinking. My father named Etienne. My mother trusted Marie. Clara is the first person who ever told me I was smart, and Elias is the man who threw me away. Vance's face turned hard. You'll regret refusing generosity. Etienne stepped closer. Leave. Now. Vance gave a mock bow. Then I'll see you in court. And I hope the girl's ready for what real questions feel like. He turned his horse and trotted back up the ridge, his coat flapping like a crow's wings in the wind. Inside the house felt still again. Wania sat at the table and picked up her slate. She wrote 2 words in blocky letters, I know. Clara touched her shoulder. He's afraid of you now. Good. Marie returned the next morning with a satchel of documents and a thin line of worry between her brows. They've got a witness, she said. Elias paid a woman to say she saw you mistreating Wania, claimed you locked her in a shed. That's a lie, Etienne growled. Marie nodded. Of course. But people believe what they're paid to. Clara exhaled slowly. So we gather our own. Start with the truth. Stack it as high as they stack their lies. Wania whispered. I want to speak again. You will, Marie said. But this time we prepare for a storm. Later, while Etienne wrote out a list of witnesses and Clara stitched a clean hem into Wania's court dress, Miguel came in from the barn with red cheeks and a small smile. There's something out back, he said quietly. They followed him to the edge of the barn, where under a canvas tarp stood a small wooden lectern, simple but sturdy. On it sat a clean copybook bound in cord. Wania stepped forward. The front page had been signed in Etienne's strong hand for Wania, so her story is never forgotten. Her hands shook as she touched it. Miguel murmured, You've got a voice now. Might as well build it a home. That night, Wania didn't sleep right away. She sat by the window, moonlight silver on the floor, and wrote her name again and again. Then, underneath it, she wrote, I am not waiting anymore. She closed the book, set it by her pillow, and crawled under the quilt. Whatever storm Elias was bringing, she would meet it standing. Some folks don't come for justice, they come for a show, and they don't care who burns in the middle. The courtroom in Wolf Point was packed by noon. Church ladies fanned themselves in the back row, even though the stove hadn't been lit, their eyes darting toward Wania like she was some kind of curiosity. Men leaned forward on the benches, hats in hand, whispering behind weather-creased palms. A few of the ranchers Etienne had done business with nodded politely when he passed. Most didn't look at him at all. Marie sat behind Wania, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. Clara was beside her with a bundle of notes. Etienne stood at the defendant's table, his hands resting on the polished wood fingers, spread wide like he meant to hold the whole thing down. Across from them sat Elias, smug in his clean coat, flanked by Vance Mallory, and the woman they'd brought as a witness, pale-faced, quiet, and wrapped in a blue shawl. Judge Two Bears entered from the side room, and the whispers died instantly. He didn't sit right away, just looked across the room like he was measuring weight. We are here today to determine guardianship of Wania Spotted Elk, he said, voice even. To determine not only what is legal, but what is right. He sat, and the trial began. Vance stood first. His words were smooth and slow practiced. The girl in question, while brave, has been under the care of a man with no formal guardianship, no blood ties, no legal training. And while the intentions may appear noble, we must ask, was she truly safe? Was this environment best? He gestured toward Elias. Her only living family, her uncle seeks to provide structure, permanence. and a direct line to her cultural heritage. Clara leaned over to Wanya and whispered, "He's dressing poison up in sugar." Then they brought the woman forward, the supposed neighbor from across the reservation. She took the stand, eyes downcast. I saw the girl locked in a shed, crying, alone, where the judge asked, "Behind Mr. Baptiste's barn, middle of winter, maybe 2 months ago. And you were visiting?" She hesitated, passing through. Etienne stood, voice firm. "Your Honor, that shed is padlocked from the outside. No one has used it in 6 months. Miguel can testify to that. And Wanya's sleeping cot is inside the house next to the stove. Always has been." Two Bears nodded. "We'll hear from Miguel shortly." Vance stepped in. "You'll note that even if conditions have improved, the initial decision to keep her without notifying proper authorities raises concern." Etienne didn't flinch. She had no papers, no protection. Only a note from her father and signs of neglect. I acted because no one else did. The judge called Miguel forward next. Quiet as always, Miguel took his oath and spoke simply. "I fixed that shed. Locks rusted solid. No one could get in or out. Did you ever see Mr. Baptiste mistreat the girl?" "No," Miguel said. "She learns fast. Works when she can. I call her Little Elk. Strong legs, fast heart." A few people in the room chuckled softly. Wanya smiled at her knees. Next came Clara. She handed over the ledger, the schoolwork, her own notes. She answered every question clearly, steadily. She couldn't sleep through the night when she came. She flinched at doors opening, wouldn't eat if someone watched her. "What changed?" the judge asked. She was given time, patience, and people who kept their word. Then came Marie. She brought out the naming bowl, the beads, the tribal documents from Chaska's community. She spoke of traditions, of memory, of Wanya's cultural roots, and the way Etienne had honored them. She didn't just get a roof over her head, Marie said. She got her language back, her voice, her people. Vance pressed her. "And yet Mr. Baptiste is not Crow, not Cheyenne." Marie met his gaze. "No, but he has cared for her as if she were his own. And our people have always known that blood isn't the only bond. Loyalty makes family." Finally, Judge Two Bears looked at Wanya. "Would you like to speak?" She nodded, and Etienne helped her step forward. The room went still. Wanya stood in front of the bench, hands gripping the satchel pressed to her side. "I don't remember everything about my papa," she began. "But I remember how he held me when I cried. I remember he called me Wanya and said it meant I was made of snow and strength. He said if I ever got lost, I should find Etienne, because he would never leave me." She opened the satchel, pulled out the copybook, and showed the front page. "I've been writing what I remember, what I know now." She read aloud slowly, but without stopping. "I was left in the cold. Not by strangers, but by family. I was found by someone who didn't have to care. He chose to. He didn't wait for permission to save me. He just did." She looked straight at Elias. "I'm not scared of you anymore." Vance started to speak, but the judge lifted a hand. "I've heard enough." The room exhaled. Two Bears leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "This case is a mirror," he said. "It's shown us who protects and who takes, who builds and who destroys. I will render my verdict tomorrow morning, but let me be clear, my decision will not be based on fear, tradition, or appearances. It will be based on care, on truth." He stood. Court is adjourned for the day. Clara slipped her arm around Wanya's shoulder as they left the courtroom. The street outside was full of watchers pretending not to watch. Elias stood under the awning of the saloon staring hard at Etienne. "You think this is done?" he called. "She's mine. That trust is mine." Etienne didn't answer. But Wania did. "No, it isn't. And neither am I." She kept walking. The snow crunched beneath her boots like bones snapping under weight. She didn't look back. They'll try one more time, not with law, but with fear. Marie said it quiet that morning as they saddled the horses. The frost on the ground was sharp, harder than it had been the day before. Everything felt brittle, the kind of cold that snapped fences and made even the sturdiest hands fumble. Etienne glanced toward the horizon and saw it the strange stillness that sometimes came before things tipped sideways. They were due in court within the hour. Wania wore her dark blue dress again, her boots freshly cleaned. Clara had pinned a small braid of sweetgrass to her collar. She stood straighter today. Her eyes didn't scan the ground, they held to the road, to the wind, to the sky above Wolf Point. Miguel stayed back to tend the ranch, but not before he pressed a small carved token into Wania's hand. "For strength," he said. Made it from a fence post. One that never broke. As they rode toward town, Marie pulled her horse close to Etienne's. "If he's going to strike, it'll be today," she murmured. "He knows this is his last chance." "I know. He may not use words." Etienne's grip tightened on the reins. "Then neither will I." The courthouse was quieter than the day before. No townsfolk lined the benches, no crowd. Just the echo of boots on pine floorboards and the weight of decision in the air. Clara frowned as they entered. "Where is everyone too quiet?" Etienne said. Judge Two Bears arrived 5 minutes later, face unreadable. He motioned them into the chamber instead of the courtroom. "We'll hold final decision here," he said. "More privacy, less spectacle." Elias arrived last alone. No Vance, no witness, just the stink of stale smoke and something hungrier than desperation in his eyes. They all sat. Wania between Clara and Etienne. Marie behind her again, silent but watchful. "I've reviewed all evidence," the judge began. "Documents, testimony, personal letters. Based on the law and on my judgment of character, I will now render my decision." He paused. "I grant full guardianship of Wania Spotted Elk to Etienne Baptiste, effective immediately." Wania's breath caught. Clara reached for her hand. Etienne closed his eyes for a half-second, jaw flexing once. Elias didn't move. The judge continued. "This guardianship will include financial oversight of her trust under court monitoring until she turns 18. All motions from Elias Spotted Elk are dismissed." He looked directly at Elias. "You may file an appeal, but I advise against it." Elias stood slowly. "So that's it, that's the law." Elias leaned over the table, voice low and sharp. "You gave her to a man with no blood ties, no land in his name, just a face that makes people uneasy." Etienne didn't move. "You gave her nothing but the cold." Elias's eyes flicked to Wania. "You think this means you're safe?" She stared right back. "I know it." Elias smirked, stepped back, and walked out without another word. They waited a full minute before anyone spoke again. Judge Two Bears stood and turned to Wania. "You fought well, young one. I hope you never have to again. But if you do, remember how strong you were here." She nodded. "Thank you, Judge." Clara and Etienne gathered their things and the group stepped into the hallway. And there it was. The sound no one wanted to hear. Wood splintering, glass shattering, a scream high, sharp, and fast, then shouting from the far side of the building. Gunfire. Marie pushed Wania behind her. Etienne was already running. 2 men in dark coats had burst through the side entrance, one with a shotgun, the other with a heavy chain. Elias was behind them, shouting orders. He's trying to take her by force, Clara said, voice tight. He brought help. Juania's legs froze, but her mind did not. Marie pressed her against the wall. Do not move unless I say. Etienne barreled through the hallway and slammed into the man with the chain, knocking him sideways into a table. Papers flew. The shotgun roared once, hitting only plaster, but the echo made Juania's bones shake. 2 bears emerged from his chambers with a pistol drawn. Drop it now. The man with the gun hesitated, and Clara, quick and unshaking, hit him from behind with a ledger book. He dropped the weapon. Etienne kicked it away. Elias tried to slip out the side door. Juania stepped into the hall. Stop. Everyone froze. She walked toward him, slow, measured. Not afraid. Not this time. You brought men to hurt me, she said. To take me like a thief. Elias looked wild now, unshaved, eyes glassy. You don't know what's good for you. I know what's not. 2 bears holstered his pistol. Mr. Spotted Elk, you are under arrest for attempted abduction, unlawful entry, and conspiracy to commit harm. You will stand trial. Juania said one more thing before they took him. You never wanted me. You wanted what I had. He didn't answer. The deputies arrived, then pulled him away. She didn't watch him go. Instead, she turned to Etienne, whose coat was torn and knuckles bloodied. Are you all right? He looked at her, voice hoarse. I am now. Marie exhaled behind them. The storm came. But it didn't take us. Clara helped Juania out into the daylight where townsfolk now gathered at the edges, quiet and stunned. Someone asked what happened. Another whispered, was she hurt? Juania answered, only this, I chose my family. And they chose me back. No one had a reply to that. They left the courthouse as the sun broke through the clouds. The wind had dropped. The cold had eased. Behind them, glass still glittered across the floorboards, but the girl who had once been left in the snow now walked home in the light. Belonging doesn't ask for blood, it grows from who stays when things fall apart. The sky had just begun to melt into spring when they returned to the ranch. Snow still patched the hills like forgotten cloth, but green was pushing up through the mud. The wind smelled different now, less like ice, more like damp soil and thawed pine. Juania sat tall in the saddle shoulders, looser than they'd been in weeks. Etienne rode beside her, his hand still wrapped in cloth from the courthouse fight. He hadn't spoken much on the ride home. Not out of anger, just tired in the way that meant your soul had been stretched too thin and hadn't yet settled back. Clara rode behind them with Marie, both women quiet but alert. The ranch came into view just past the bend where the tall cottonwoods started again. Smoke curled from the chimney, soft and slow. Miguel was waiting near the barn fence, his arms folded, eyes scanning them as they approached. He said nothing at first, only nodded once to Etienne, once to Juania, and opened the gate. You look taller, he said. Juania shrugged. Might be the boots. He grinned. Inside the house had been swept clean, the fire was lit, and a pot of something warm and thick waited on the stove. Clara moved through the kitchen without words, ladling stew into bowls. She set them on the table one by one like anchors, something solid to come back to. Juania slid into her place at the table. It was the same chair she'd first eaten in months ago, when her ribs still showed through her dress, and her fingers shook when she held a spoon. It felt smaller now, but only because she had grown. Etienne sat across from her, resting his wrapped hand gently on the table. Marie poured tea and settled into the corner seat. No one said grace. No one had to. They ate in the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. When Juania finished her stew, she reached into her satchel, the one she hadn't let go of since that last day in court, and pulled out the green book and her copy journal. I want to write something different now, she said. Not about what happened, about what is. Marie nodded slowly. The shift from surviving to living. I don't know how it starts. Clara leaned in. Try this today. I saw the earth breathe again. Wania smiled and wrote the words carefully. Then beneath them, and I knew it was waiting for me too. After supper, she stepped outside with Etienne. The evening light was pale gold brushing the tops of the trees. The horses stood still near the fence, their ears twitching at the breeze. Do you think he'll come back? She asked. He can't. Not for you. She looked up. But what if someone else tries? What if the next person doesn't wait for permission either? Etienne was quiet for a long moment. Then he crouched next to her eye level. Then we'll do what we always do. We stand, we speak, we fight smart, and we stay together. She nodded, but some part of her still trembled. Not from fear, but from the memory of it. I want to keep learning, she said. More than reading. I want to know how to fix fences, how to file papers, how to write stories that matter. He smiled softly. You will. He stood again, brushing dust from his knees. We all will. This place we're building it every day. The next morning, they worked like they always had. Clara taught Wania how to boil jam jars without cracking them. Miguel handed her a hammer and let her drive nails into the edge of the corral post. Etienne showed her how to balance feed inventory in the ledger and even let her ink in the totals. It was a quiet day, but full. As the sun fell, Wania sat on the porch steps with Marie, who was weaving a thin bracelet of horsehair and blue glass beads. This is for your wrist, Marie said. To remind you. Not of pain, but of what you did with it. Wania watched her hands move. You think people like Elias ever see themselves clearly? Marie didn't look up. Some do too late. Some never, but that's not yours to carry. She nodded. I know. I just wonder sometimes if they started like us. Marie tied off the braid and placed it in her palm. Everyone starts soft. The world decides who stays that way. That night, Wania opened her copy journal and began a new page. Today I learned to measure nails and boiling points. Tomorrow I want to learn to ride fast. I want to run like I did before the cold, but this time towards something, not away. She paused, then added, I belong here, and I am staying. The fire popped once behind her. Etienne snored faintly in the next room. Clara had fallen asleep in her rocker, an open book across her lap. Marie had gone to bed after stitching a patch on Etienne's shirt, quiet acts that said love louder than most words ever could. Outside, the wind rustled the branches. Not angry, just passing through. Wania closed the journal and slipped it beneath her pillow. The ranch was hers now, not by name, not by paper, but by the people who stayed, and the home they built. Some truths take time to bloom, but when they do, they don't fade. The first real spring rain came overnight, soft and steady, drumming low on the roof like a lullaby. By morning, the whole world smelled like soil and sky, sweet, sharp, alive. Wania woke to the sound of Clara in the kitchen humming over the stove and Etienne outside whistling to the horses. No alarms, no court dates, no watchers behind saloon windows. Just morning. She sat up and stretched the journal still tucked under her pillow. She'd written something new before sleep came last night. She flipped to the page. I want to remember the quiet days too. The ones that don't feel like battles. The ones that feel like breath. The ranch was wet and shining. Miguel had already sloshed across the yard to check the troughs. Wania pulled on her boots and coat and ran out behind him, the mud sucking at her heels. Fences held, she asked. He gave a satisfied nod. Better than last year. Etienne joined them with a saddlebag slung over his shoulder and a coil of rope. Might want to ride the line later, though. See what the snowmelt's been doing near the East Ridge. I'll come, Wania said quickly. He raised an eyebrow. You sure she stood taller? You said I could learn everything, riding fast included. He handed her a brush. Start with grooming. We'll take Cinder and Chess, Clara called from the porch, and bring your slicker. You'll be wet through in 20 minutes. It was the kind of day that had no grand purpose, just chores, checks, and laughter scattered between. But by late afternoon, something changed. They'd ridden 2 miles along the fence line when Etienne slowed and pointed toward the stream crossing. A buckboard wagon sat tilted in the mud rear wheel, sunk deep, the horse still hitched, but twitching nervously. A man and woman stood beside it, arguing quietly. Etienne pulled up Chess and waved. Need help? The man turned, mid-50s, maybe face-weathered hands red from the cold and effort. The woman looked younger, with dark braids and a braid of cedar pinned to her blouse. Wheel caught, the man called. I misjudged the edge. Etienne dismounted and moved toward the wagon. Wania followed cautiously, staying by the horses. Where you headed? Etienne asked. The man grunted as he leaned against the axle. North Fork. Trying to reach the new mission school before Sunday. The woman stepped forward and gave Wania a quick, curious glance. You from the Spotted Elk place? Wania blinked. It's the Baptiste Ranch now. The woman nodded slowly. I knew your father. Long ago. Etienne paused, looking between them. What was your name? Chenoa. My brother and your father hunted bison together in the high country before the war. I thought he'd gone east. He passed, Wania said softly. The woman's face fell. I'm sorry. She stepped closer and reached into the pouch at her waist. He gave me this. Said if anything happened, I should pass it to his daughter. But I never knew where to find you. She unwrapped a small bundle of deerskin and held it out. Inside was a silver brooch shaped like a rising sun, the center set with a small turquoise stone. I remember that, Wania whispered. He wore it on his good coat. He said it was his mother's, Chenoa said, and that someday it should go to you. Wania took it in her hands. It was heavier than she remembered. Warmer, too. Etienne watched her carefully. You all right? She nodded, eyes not leaving the brooch. It's like hearing his voice. They helped the couple with the wagon, wedging stones beneath the sunken wheel and easing it free with a long lever pole Etienne cut from a fallen branch. The horse shook out its mane when they finally got moving again, as if grateful. Before they parted, Chenoa pressed her hand to Wania's. He was proud of you, she said. Even before you could speak, he said you had fire in you. Wania blinked back tears. Thank you for not forgetting. She watched them disappear down the road before turning back toward home, her palm still wrapped around the brooch. That night she placed it carefully inside her journal between the pages, where she wrote about fear and snow and firelight. Then she began a new page. Today a stranger gave me my father back. Not the whole of him, just a piece. But it was enough. She paused, then added, I used to think that memory was what kept people from disappearing. But now I think it's the stories. The ones we write. The ones we keep. After dinner, Clara lit the lamp and asked Wania to read aloud from the Green Book again. Her voice was stronger now, less halting. She even added inflection lifting at the end of a question, pausing before something sad. It was like music, Clara said. She was learning the rhythm. When they finished, Etienne pulled a small tin from the top shelf and opened it to reveal old photos, some faded, some curled, some almost gone. He spread them on the table and pointed one out. That's Chaska, just after he bought his first horse. Wania leaned in. He looked so young. He was. That's the strange part about photographs. They freeze time, but not memory. Marie arrived late, bringing a new bundle of mail from town. A few bills, a letter from the judge confirming the guardianship in writing, and a parcel wrapped in brown paper with Wanya's name scrawled in looping ink. She opened it slowly. Inside was a slim leather-bound notebook. The first page read, "From one storyteller to another." You'll know what to fill it with. No signature. Just that. She looked around the table, Clara stirring sugar into her tea, Etienne polishing his boots. Miguel quietly sketching a new fence line on scrap paper, Marie unfolding a piece of beadwork. All of them her people, not one by blood, all by choice. She held the notebook to her chest. She had her name, her voice, and now her beginning. If you've survived the winter, don't forget you've earned the spring. The cottonwoods along the ridge were blooming pale green again, their thin leaves shimmering in the breeze like river water catching light. The whole valley had softened. Snow had vanished from the trails, and even the rocks looked warmer. For the first time in what felt like years, the cold had let go for good. Juania stood at the fence line just after sunrise, arms resting on the top rail, her hair braided and tucked beneath her scarf. The world felt bigger now, not just because the sky had stretched open, but because she was no longer holding her breath. Every morning felt like something she could step into instead of endure. Behind her, Etienne was saddling the horses. He worked with quiet rhythm, his healed hand strong again, though he still wrapped it in a band when doing heavier work. Clara was packing a lunch, calling for Juania to grab her boots. They were riding out together today, just the three of them, to the place where Chaska had taken Etienne on his first spring roundup. A little clearing past the ridge near the old sugar pines. Not far, but far enough to feel like something new. Juania walked back toward the barn, the wet grass soaking through the hem of her dress. "You ready?" Etienne asked without turning. "I've been ready," she said. He looked back and gave a slow nod. "I believe you." The ride out was quiet in the best way. The trail had dried just enough to be soft underfoot, and the air was thick with the smell of pine resin and damp earth. Birds had returned, swooping low across the field. Clara pointed to a pair of bluebirds darting between fence posts. "First ones I've seen this year." Juania smiled, her hands steady on the reins. "Maybe they're following us." They reached the clearing mid-morning. The pines cast long shadows and a small creek cut through the center. There was a flat spot just beyond the bend where someone had once left behind a rusted kettle and the remnants of a fire ring. Etienne dismounted and handed Juania the reins. "Tie them here, then come walk with me." Clara stayed behind, unpacking their lunch onto a quilt she'd spread under a tree. Juania followed Etienne past the trees, where the land dipped slightly into a shallow hollow. "This is where Chaska buried something," he said. "Didn't tell me what it was, just said it was for when things were finished. I didn't come back after he died. Not till now." They searched the edge of the hollow, the ground still soft from thaw. After a while, Juania found it, an old tobacco tin, rusted at the seams, wedged beneath a flat stone. Etienne knelt and pried it open. Inside was a folded scrap of hide, brittle and stained. When he unwrapped it, he found a few simple things: a flat river stone with markings carved into it, a small wooden comb, and a faded photo of a woman holding a baby in her lap. Juania leaned in. "That's me." Etienne nodded. "And that's your mother." She stared at the woman's face, calm, strong, beautiful. Something in the way she held the baby, so protective and proud, made Juania's throat ache. "She had a name," Etienne said quietly. "It was Sakari. Your father told me once. Said it meant sweet." Wania repeated it under her breath. Sakari. They sat in the grass for a while, saying nothing. The sun warmed the top of her head and her knees, and for the first time, it didn't feel like her past was something to run from. It felt like something she could carry, not heavy, but real. When they walked back to the quilt, Clara had poured tea into enamel mugs. They ate in the sunshine, passing stories back and forth like passing bread. Etienne told her how Chaska used to sing while mending tack. Clara told a tale about a goat that got loose in town and ended up on the church roof. Wania listened, laughed, and added one of her own, about the first time she tried to braid Marie's hair and tied the ends into a knot so tight it had to be cut out. When the wind picked up slightly, she pulled the leather-bound journal from her satchel, the one with no name yet just blank pages waiting. I want to start today, she said. Clara smiled. What's the title? Wania thought for a moment, then opened the cover and wrote slowly, carefully, things that were almost lost. She turned the page and began. There was a night so cold it froze my voice, but someone heard me anyway, and I was not left there. The words came easily now. Not all perfect, not all quick, but they came. Etienne leaned back on his elbows, staring at the sky. You ever wonder what comes next? Wania glanced up from her page. No, I think it just comes, one sunrise at a time. He nodded, thoughtful. That's enough. Later, when they rode home, the light was gold and long, and the ranch looked like a painting, warm wood, smoke rising, animals grazing. Miguel waved from the shed, and Marie stood on the porch with a basket full of greens from the early garden. Everything ordinary, everything full. Wania walked to the fence and watched the sky for a long time. She touched the brooch pinned at her collar, then ran her fingers along the leather journal. The wind tugged her braid gently. She closed her eyes and listened. There was no silence. There was a song now of wind, of names remembered, of stories rising like green through snow. She was not a girl lost anymore. She was rooted. She had survived the winter, and now she would live the spring.